Conway still back with their results of their month and a half long.
We're still in the middle of
We're
it.
still in the middle of it.
Preliminary.
Preliminary.
So maybe before they start, I just want to take an opportunity to introduce a few folks that are in the room. We have a new conservation agent, Pat Galvin. If anybody's wandering around in the wetlands, we'll run into Pat. The chair of our Community Preservation Commission, Lisa Penton, is here. The Crosby family is here, and they're a part of this property. Their family's been willing to go forward and sell this property. Very favorable price to the town of Scituate, and adding a big piece to this. So they're all here this evening. Appreciate it. Cindy Robbins from Maxwell Trust, who really has pushed this along so hard here. Cindy, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Two Concom members, Kevin Tufts, Tony Jones is in here somewhere, and Penny Pipes, whose husband Carl was a big part of doing the Carl Pipes trail and update system and all that as well. So, is there anybody else that the family has sold a piece of property? I'm missing that this evening. I'm sure I don't forget that, but we've been fortunate with a number of, well, Steve Bjorklund's in the back. He's one of the small piece. Well, it all adds up. And so we appreciate it. So I think I haven't missed much. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna and Emily and Noah. Thanks.
Thank you. And bear with us, I'm going to turn off the lights, so hopefully you know where you are. Could you turn down the heater so it doesn't turn off and turn on again? Just turn the little thingy all the way to the left or something, because it gets real loud.
Spill a little water for it.
Imagine a forest you can visit anytime you want. Imagine a forest where a child can explore, turn over a log, and find a salamander. Imagine a forest where a businesswoman can come at the end of a stressful day and walk her dog for hours if she wants. Imagine a forest where an angry teenager can come sit by this stream and watch the water run over the rocks and realize it's all going to be okay. That's the kind of place that you have here in Scituate, and that's the kind of place we want to protect. My name is Anna Best, this is Noah Zimmerman, and Emily DeRost, and we're working on a conservation management and recreation plan for these particular lands in Scituate called the Bates Lane Conservation Area, the Crosby Family Preserve, and Appleton Fields Farm. Our goals for this project are to maintain and enhance the ecosystem, but also to meet the needs of this community. And in order to get there, tonight we're going to provide you with some preliminary recommendations that for habitat management, enhancing safety, and site design, such as access, parking, and trails. And we're going to gather your feedback at the end of this, and we have another month to go before we finalize our recommendations. We believe that humans are a part of ecology, that humans, everything we do affects this world around us. But we also recognize that humans don't always have the best effect on the ecosystem, so we put the needs of the community and the needs of the ecosystem next to each other, but overlapping. And in that space where the two overlap, that's where our design hopes to nestle. Scituate, as you know, is a bedroom community about 30 miles from Boston, mostly developed along the coast. You've been very welcoming to us, and we want to thank you for that. You've been very involved in these town proceedings, and you obviously care because this is literally your backyard, and you're concerned about the future of these properties, so thank you for turning out tonight. In our previous meeting, we asked what was most important about these sites, and these are some buzzwords that came out. And the ones that were most frequently used, where that you really value your old trees, your trails, and your peace and quiet. This is the current activities that you guys told us were the most important to you. Number 1 was hiking. Next was dog walking. And then hunting and winter sports were about equal. Again, this is just one cross-section of the community. There's lots of you here. And you told us some suggested improvements. You asked for no motor vehicles on the property, better trail access. You asked us to leave the forest alone. You asked us to limit hunting, prohibit fires, have better signs, better parking. This community is located in a large forest core, and that forest core is made up of Wampatuck State Park, Whitney Thayer Woods, and your focus area right here. You can see this pattern more clearly when you just look at the tree cover, which is shown in black. White is everything except tree cover. You can see that with these red bullseye things, you can see that this forest core is the darkest in the center, and as you move further away from our focus area, which is shown as a star, it gets more and more developed. So we have a special place. Scituate's West End, as you know, has a rural residential feeling to it. There are country lanes that wind through mature forests, and these open spaces help to preserve that rural feeling that you guys value so much. So our focus area is approximately 400 acres that belong to this town. The Bates Lane Conservation Area is the larger area to the north. The smaller area to the south is a combination of Appleton Fields Farm and Crosby Family Preserve. And we're going to get to know those sites right now with all these maps. We're going to layer them together. The focus area is located in the town of Scituate, but it's right on the border with Cohasset, and Hingham and Norwell are very close by. So all of these towns pretty much share this valuable piece of land. So we have to consider everybody's use. The property has been purchased piece by piece over the last decade, which means that all those parcels compiled together mean that there have been very diverse land owners over history, as well as diverse land use over history. So we've got quite a mixture. The important neighbors include mostly homes. We're surrounded by homes. That's Frank's house, and I think that's Carol's house. Is that right? Yeah. There's, of course, the Mount Hope Improvement Society to the south, and the Scituate Rod and Gun Club to the north, which is an important local gathering place for hunters. Shown in yellow here is prime farmland soils. And most of the prime farmland has been developed or is currently forested. However, this small piece right here is Appleton Fields Farm, which has been historically farmed and was left to become old fields and grew up in small trees, and Vin Buca cleared it for us and is now currently farming it again. So that prime farmland is very useful because it's the only one that's not developed or forested. And here's some pictures. This is Appleton Fields Farm, and that's Vin's vegetable patch with his deer fence. There are 2 red pine plantations on the Crosby Family Preserve. And here's a photo of one of the canopies. Unfortunately, they're not terribly healthy, and we'll tell you more about that later. This is sort of a setting the scene here. There are 3 access points, 2 that go north into the Crosby Family. I keep doing that. The Bates Lane Conservation Area, and then one that goes south into Appleton Fields Farm. There's no official parking on these sites, but there's unofficial off-site parking provided by Frank Snow and the Mount Hope Improvement Society located here in red. There are many hiking trails that have been created by users over time, and there are also large areas that don't have official trails. Now this is an image of the terrain without any trees on it, so that we can look at drainage patterns of water. The blue arrows are drainage arrows. So the drainage from the focus area feeds Bound Brook to the north, South Swamp, and then First Herring Brook to the south, and the Erin River Reservoir to the west. So this is an important area of headwaters. And that matters because our focus area feeds Scituate's and Cohasset's drinking water supplies. That means that everything we do on this site has regional implications. Shown here in blue are wetlands, which run through the middle of the Bates Lane Conservation Area, and they surround the Crosby and Appleton area. This is upland forests. You'll notice that there's very little purely deciduous forest that's shown here in this very pale green. These tiny little spots here are only deciduous forest. The rest is a patchwork of mixed and coniferous forests, mostly pine. This could be a reflection of different land use histories over time. These tiny red stars that you might be able to see are certified and uncertified vernal pools, and 3 of them are within our focus area. These are critical habitat for cute little animals like the spotted salamander, the wood frog, and the fairy shrimp. As well, to the south, there is a rare natural community of Atlantic white cedar trees. And those are in the South Swamp here, shown in red. Those are also critical habitat. Now notice that the cedar stand is outside of our focus area technically, but the town did ask us to consider the South Swamp because they intend to acquire it in the future. Shown here in yellow hatches is priority habitat of rare species such as the eastern box turtle, the four-toed salamander, swamped duck, the plant, and spotted turtles. So most of the site is priority habitat. That's important. That was a lot of maps, so let's take a walk. We're tired of looking at maps here. We're going to take a walk along the Maxwell Trail and look at several different habitats. First is a mature mixed forest of coniferous and deciduous trees. It's really beautiful here as you're walking along, but there is a problem that you look around in the understory of the forest and there's very little hardwood regeneration. There's very few saplings that are not pine trees. That's happening because deer browse is suppressing beech trees and oak saplings, but they do leave behind birch and pine. So the deer are eating away many of our important saplings. Walking along and continuing, we find some sensitive wetland habitats that are very beautiful, such as this beautiful bridge built by volunteers, some of whom are in this room, thank you. It goes over a boulder-filled swale dominated by hemlock trees. Very beautiful there. And I won't tell you where, but somewhere in this area there is a geocache, if any of you are geocache seekers. And now we move along to find TP Rock, which is an important picturesque overlook into lowland forests. And it's beautiful here, but if you turn around, you also see that there have been fires lit in this little fire pit, as well as litter left behind, unfortunately. But let's move on to the pine-dominated forest, which is often characterized by these patches of dense pine saplings. And that's happening because the deer prefer not to eat pine trees, as you recall. Instead, they browse on competing species such as oak, beech, and hemlock. This is what a tiny twig of when a deer has nibbled away the buds, which are very nutritious to the deer. Moving along, we see rock walls that surround all the historic parcels. I'm sure you're all familiar with rock walls. The forest on one side of the rock wall is subtly different from the other side. And that's happening because the different landowners cut their forests at different times. As we walk along the rock wall, the trained eye notices large trees that are remaining along those rock walls, and they're still present because they were along the parcel boundary and the farmer didn't cut them. And if you can think back to all the large trees that you've seen growing on the edges of large open areas, and their canopies are spread wide, and then if you can imagine those empty fields growing up and filling in around that large tree, that's what we refer to as a wolf tree, and there are lots of those throughout this land. So could all this eco-literacy be passed on if there were educational markers along the trails, or even a handout that people could take with them as they walked along? Any of these are possible. So this place you have is pretty fantastic, honestly, already. But the pieces of this puzzle feel scattered. To create a cohesive whole, we need to create a conservation and management plan in order to create a cohesive whole out of these diverse uses and habitats. So our vision for the future, again, lies in the overlapping space between the needs of this community and the needs of the ecosystem. In this community, we've heard tension between changing and preserving this landscape. We've also heard fear towards creating new trails, altering the forest at all, and continuing to allow hunting. But we believe that part of our task is to use historical and ecological evidence to be sensitive stewards of this land and find the best path forward. But to understand how to go forward, we need to understand where we've been. So let's take a quick look at the history of a New England landscape. This is generally New England, but we can apply it to Scituate. Pre-settlement, this is what your forests may have looked like. They're very diverse, very different from they are today. When the first settlers came, they began clearing the forest and building homesteads in West Scituate. This is what it might have looked like. And then during the agricultural period, which was Scituate's most prosperous time, that was the peak of deforestation. And you can see this map, which was drawn in 1831, shows that the South Swamp was fully forested, while the Bates Lane Conservation Area, the shape that it is today, is completely deforested. During the early industrial period, farming declined and many pastures were abandoned, and those pastures reverted to white pine-dominated forests. And then many of those white pine stands were cut for lumber. And then hardwoods were able to succeed due to their ability to sprout from their roots and their stumps. And we can still see this history today on Bates Lane, where if you look to the left, you have early successional hardwoods, and to the right, there's old field white pines that are much larger. So as we honor this history, we do want to move into the future. So Emily's going to tell you a bit about that.
So to move into the future, we want to look again to that space between the needs of the community and the needs of the ecosystem through the following recommendations on the red pine and Atlantic white cedar, ecological enhancement, deer management, hunting and safety, and site design, such as access, parking, and trails. Remember, these are guidelines for a dynamic cultural and ecological community that by their very nature need to be periodically reassessed and adapted to changing conditions. As Anna previously mentioned, there are 2 red pine plantations on the Crosby Family Preserve. Red pine is native to North America, but just south of its range here in Scituate. Growing outside of its range usually results in higher pest and weather-related problems. Both of these patches are each roughly 1 acre in size, and neither have been actively managed. So many of the trees host vine species such as bittersweet, honeysuckle, grape, and poison ivy. We recommend one of two options. We can either harvest both of these stands and create a healthier habitat in its place. The wood that is produced could be used on-site when applicable, such as trail maintenance and kiosks, or sold for funds for other projects. The other option is to manage both stands as they are, keep invasive species from spreading to other sites, and reassess the situation in coming years. The Atlantic white cedar in the South Swamp is considered a rare natural community. Germination requires open sunlight, generally acquired through heavy disturbances such as blowdowns, fire, and logging, and because of this, it is generally found in even-aged stands. We have roughly 15 acres of single-aged cedar with no active regeneration. The stand is not at the height of its maturity and is not in immediate threat of dying off. Again, we recommend one of two options. The first is little to no management. As I said, the stand is not an immediate threat, and we are unsure of future climate changes and its effect on the species. This course, again, would require reassessment in the future. Another option is to manage for regeneration by clear-cutting an area beside the stand and managing against competing saplings. This would require deer-proofing the area because they browse on cedar saplings. If we consider the forest as a whole, we recommend a light management approach. There may be opportunities to do some forestry with the intent of enhancing forest health by selectively cutting for a more diverse habitat. We would bring in a professional forester to do this specific work. However, we believe that the deer population is at the heart of these recommendations, and because their browsing may negate any attempt at regeneration. Scituate is located in Zone 11, right here, of the Mass Wildlife's deer population assessment, and is categorized as being over the density goal. This area has reached its biological carrying capacity, meaning it is over the number of deer that a given parcel can support in good physical condition. As we saw, deer are preventing regeneration of certain forest species. The area has also reached its cultural carrying capacity, meaning the maximum number of deer that can coexist compatibly with the local human populations. Deer are browsing on residential landscapes or are involved in a number of collisions on Route 3A. Hunting seasons, bag limits, and antlerless deer permits are set by the State Department of Fisheries and Wildlife to achieve density goals, which are roughly 10 to 30 per square mile. State hunting regulations mandate the basic hunter education course for first-time hunters or hunting license buyers. Hunting is not allowed within 500 feet of a building or designated parking or picnic area, or within 150 feet of a paved road. In addition to the state regulations, the town of Scituate does not allow hunting east of 3A, while hunting is currently allowed in our focus area. Many of the residents surrounding Bates Lane property would like hunting banned because they don't feel safe in the woods. For deer management, we recommend education by creating deer exclosures to visually see the impacts of deer browse, and bringing in a field biologist to monitor and study these sites. We also recommend to continue hunting with enhanced safety measures, which Noah will explain in a minute. Mass Wildlife believes traditional hunting is an effective and inexpensive management strategy.
Thank you. So continuing hunting with enhanced safety. The first question we're going to look at is, what is safety? There's this sense of physical safety, and there's also perceived safety. This graph shows that you're more likely to die in a motor vehicle accident, which is 1 out of 88 people, than a firearms discharge accident, which is 1 in over 6,000 people. So why do I feel safe in my car and not out in the woods? We believe this has to do with a sense of control and a sense of understanding of the situation. So our continued hunting with enhanced safety is going to have a spatial and also an educational component. Currently there's about 500-foot buffer around every building. So this is what it looks like currently. A further recommendation could say prohibit hunting southwest of Bates Lane. So this gives the user a better sense of control and understanding of the property. And also this area has more trail density, so it still allows passive recreation with less concern of running into hunters. An educational component could be having clear comprehension and also hunter appreciation. Many of you probably recognize this sign, but pretty much it says hunting is allowed all year long, but sometimes more intensive than others. So we put forth a new sign that says something like hunting is allowed, and then have very clear dates, some rules with the visuals, and then at the end say, we thank our hunters. That's the community coming out and say, we recognize you guys as providing an important management strategy to our community. So there could be other recommendations if safety doesn't feel like it's being addressed enough. That could be making tree stands mandatory or make hunters take proficiency tests. But we do not believe that it's necessary to prohibit hunting in order to meet the goals of safety. If we don't feel like the management strategies are working and the goal densities are not being met, we could go further and recommend community hunts or also hunter education courses to bring more hunters into the community. So parts of this puzzle are beginning to be put together as we looked into safety and ecology, but we think site design is going to help to make this a cohesive whole, and that's access, parking, and trails. Currently, there's 2 unofficial parking lots with access, and they would like to build a new parking lot on Base Lane Preserve, and they must build a right-of-way to continue to access the Appleton Field. There's about 3.7 miles of trails that radiate off Base Lane, which is a dirt road, and the trails are mostly used by hikers and dog walkers, and in general there is only one off-trail destination, and that's Teepee Rock along Maxwell Trail. So first we're going to look at where these trails came from. This is a 1943 topographic map, and here's the trails at that time. In 1943 there were 10 mapped access points, and Base Lane was being used to access a gravel pit. This is what that gravel pit looks like today. I believe this gravel pit was used to build 3A. So we believe this gravel pit is an incredibly beautiful place and could really serve as a new heart of the community and a destination point, and is also accessible to pretty much everyone who'd like to get out there. So where these trails came from, we're going to have to look at water. And this is frequent ponding and also wetlands on the property. And then slopes in green is under 10%. Usually universally accessible trails are under 5%. And then also ecologically sensitive areas. As Anna mentioned earlier, there's all priority habitat, but in that green color is core habitat, and that's a little more specific to rare species, and it's also characterized on Base Lane by that series of vernal pools. So putting these all on top of each other shows that there's steeper and wetter areas to the northeast. Also there's the ecologically sensitive area to the southwest with those vernal pools and wetlands. Many of the old trails don't cross the wetlands, steep slopes, or ecologically sensitive areas. Many of the current trails have water crossings, they pass over slopes greater than 20%, and weave through ecologically sensitive areas and vernal pool zones. Here's looking at those trails in section. For a reference point, Teepee Rock is located about here in this steep area, what appears to not be a very accessible place to a lot of people. So all these trails are pretty much characterized by being either steep, wet, or moving through ecologically sensitive areas, except Carl Pipes and Base Lane. And it turns out those are the 2 trails that still persist today from the 1948 map. There they are. So it appears the criteria of the trails has changed from a history of efficiency to a present state of discovery and adventure. And this seems to relate to the changing needs of the community as well as the changing needs of the ecosystem. These trails used to just be getting people from point A to B, and now it's more important to go see these special places. And we think one of the most important needs of the ecosystem now is to create a sense of stewardship. And how we do that is keep bringing people to these ecologically sensitive areas, but at the same time we need to protect them. And that's the balance we're going to be looking for. And now I'll show you some alternative designs for site design. versus a limited access design. In this design, there's 3 wetland crossings, there's no new trails, there's 2 parking lots, there's 4 official access points, and there's the right-of-way that goes down to the Appleton Fields. In a more increased access version, there's 7 wetland crossings, there's about 2 miles of new trails, there's 5 new parking lots, 10 official access points, and still that right-of-way that goes down to Appleton Field. So taking these designs and adding on top of the management strategies that we talked about earlier, one design could look like this, the limited access. In this version, hunting is not restricted, dogs must be leashed, universally accessible trail to destination, which is in the gravel pit. There's no bikes allowed. The red pines are managed just for invasives, and the Atlantic white cedars are left alone. In the increased access version, hunting is restricted and leashes are required southwest of Bates Lane. There's a universally accessible trail to the destination in the gravel pit, and it continues onward on the horse trail as it comes back on a loop on Bates. Bikes are allowed on Bates Lane. The red pines are harvested and turned into meadow and pasture. The Atlantic white cedars are managed for regeneration as well as a boardwalk that goes out to it. Also, there's educational opportunities in farming, ecology, history, and land management. And there's deer exclosures placed throughout for monitoring the impacts. So we can take these management strategies and connect them to the whole region through a 10-mile bike loop. It goes from Bates Lane to the Boston commuter train as it goes through Wampatuck State Park and on the spur trail through Whitney Thayer Woods. These trails are already there. They just need to be better mapped with some good signs along the routes. So looking at these again, both of them have their pros and cons. At first sight, you can see that limited access probably isn't going to fragment the landscape as much. But maybe it won't bring the young people out as much and create this steward that we think is so necessary for today. And there's all sorts of other pros and cons, and what we think probably in the end will be taking some sort of synthesis between these 2 designs and finding a balance. And partly that's why we're here today, to talk to all of you. And we have, can you get those lights?
I'll do it slowly, sorry.
Thank you. So we're going to pass out some comment forms, and we'd love to hear what you think about these designs, and we'll take those, and then in the next few weeks we're going to be creating a more final design and final recommendations. And there's printouts of both of these on the back table. And if you guys feel like grabbing some snacks and talking about it and filling out those forms, we can all get back together in about 20 minutes. And Frank will help us facilitate a little question and comment session. Thank you very much.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Why do you want to restrict hunting southwest of Bates Lane as opposed to any place else?
Because it appeared to have more trail density in that area, and we thought we wanted to keep hunting potentially off of Bates Lane to give people a feeling of where they could go and not be.
Where is southwest?
That's in this region.
So if you're entering Bates Lane, right here, to the left.
That's Forest, Litchfield, and Bates Lane.
Okay, I don't understand that, but all right.
All right.
Yeah, so give us your feedback on these forms, and we'll have a question and answer session after we have some.
Is that good question right now? Should we wait or should we?
Yeah, we can,
Yeah, let's have a
but there's loads of coffee and dessert, so, and there's also
You're
some
gonna
great
have a question and
Oh no,
answer.
that's I'm done now.
It's just after you
No,
process
I'm up
on
here
your-
now.
on your
It's all
form.
good.
We also have copies of these 2 designs if you want to have a closer look at them. I'll put them on both of the table. I know you want questions afterward, but I'm trying to understand.
All right.
There's a couple copies.
Just those two. I get the last very loud. Just turned
Just a Scituate trail with a set of signs that express the
It
rules.
would have to be,
But we haven't put forth necessarily how these actions would go.
it's a recommendation.
Need to socialize.
But not necessarily.
We've had that discussion.
Where we propose parking has a little white car. So the little kiosk in the front has a little car with a parking lot. And this one has a bigger parking lot.
Looking at signs
But right now, that increase in my life, whether it's legal.
It would be a parking lot. People might park. We saw that there was already.
No, it's not. No, I mean, I feel very, yeah, that's one that's
Yeah, the thing is, one part of this is that we've been also employed to look at the South Wall.
I have
The idea that if they purchase a South Wall, something else could be.
all access to our house right there. Development is going to be able to address you'd be able to get by this whole area.
I've heard that.
I don't think back here all the time. We never run the city.
What do you think about that?
Was your dad or your grandmother?
What season is this on? Lands, all tax, that's it.
Let's talk about this.
Church wants to sit up front.
I don't have a cowbell. That's your
Can I forgot to do something. Can we just kind of reconvene for the end of this? And there was a couple of people I did forget. I knew I'd do that. Jill Capodanno is in here somewhere. She and a group of folks around here kept this Mount Hope building moving, and she made sure that we had this evening. And Howard Matthews is in the room, and Howard is part of the Mount Hope group, and Howard's already got the trails all cleaned up and recorded in that everything's fine. And whoops. Well, more or less, but thank you both very much for letting us be here tonight. Thank you.
Great, so we wanted to gather up and just have a few minutes for Q&A. We have 30 minutes. We are not going to go over 30 minutes. We're setting ourselves a rule. Hopefully we can go even shorter. So
Anna's very good at it, adjournment.
yeah. So we want to hear what you liked, what you don't like, and why, and keep it brief so that everybody can have a chance to talk who wants to. Great.
Also, if you've got any questions that we can answer.
Yeah.
And please keep in mind that this is continuing, so your input here
It's an ongoing
will be
process.
added to what's been presented.
Yeah, we haven't even started writing the document yet, so this is all going to be incorporated. So who would like to kick us off? Who has a question or a comment? Okay.
It's just a little scary for me to look at the increased access.
Okay.
To live out in the woods and it's nice and quiet streets. Look at this and it looks like the map that I just got back from vacation at Disney. And it looks like, you know, Frontierland, Futureland.
Those are really big. We're going to make like 30-foot tall
Yes.
kiosks.
Yeah. So, and you know, the idea of having a parking lot on Bates Lane, I was kind of getting used to that. And then to see two parking lots on Bates Lane, and one of them right across my house and one next to it, you know, it's a little overwhelming. So that'll be my input.
I would just like to say to that is the farthest end of our spectrum that we're looking at. I mean, and in the end, none of these are going to go in straight away. We may start with just one parking lot on Bates Lane, and if we see in the future that we need more, these are possible sites.
Or one or the other. Like, and maybe not either one of those two spots in particular, but as we discussed a little bit, anything that is done like that will be done in an open format. In addition, this is a recommendation. When we go to put a parking lot somewhere, just like the hearings that we had that go into the Crosby piece, they'll be advertised meetings so that people can come in and express their concerns and go from there. Our concerns will be safety, will be vandalism, and all those sort of things that are part of opening something like that up. So we'll be concerned about all that.
With multiple access points too, we have one up by the Rod and Gun Club with a road that's already built. You can build it right off the road. Bates Lane is, you know, really an unpaved road and it's a mess right now. We've had to tow cars off of Bates Lane this week, or last week I should say, because of mud. I want to just, maybe say, let's look at other, access points are there. Up by the Rod and Gun Club.
So are you in favor of that access point? Or are you
I'm in favor. Yeah, I'd be in favor of
Okay.
up by the Rod and Gun Club.
In the back there?
As I talked to Noah and you, I've got an issue with southwest of Bates Lane being restricted to hunting. I'd rather see a larger buffer zone across behind all the houses. instead of pushing the hunting towards the houses that already got hit by bullets,
Okay.
okay? What that buffer zone is, I don't know, that's for the town to discuss, I think.
It's currently 500 feet.
That's the
Yeah,
state
it's
minimum is
500
500 feet from a house or marked property,
Okay.
okay? So I would rather see you increase that minimum instead of blocking off the whole section and pushing hunting closer to the houses that got hit.
Okay.
All right, it
So
just makes no sense to me.
Is what I'm hearing you say that you would propose widening the buffer
Yes,
from homes,
right.
right?
Push it so there's no homes that hunters are going to be near,
Okay.
all right, relatively near. I'm not saying cut out hunting, what I'm saying is you can't have someone 500 feet, so you can't be, whatever this is, west here. There's no hunting here. And they say, oh, but you can go over here near these houses. You know? All right, so that big block, doing it that way, to me, doesn't work. It's not fair to the people that are living in those other areas.
I would second that.
Okay. Thank you for that input. Vin?
Does your plan call for any kind of forest fire management component?
Not currently. The foresters that we've talked to and field biologists didn't think that it was a major concern on this site. The current plant communities, in addition to weather conditions and the very moist site, we didn't see that it was a big concern.
The reason why I bring it up,
But we do want to consider it, but it's not a big.
the reason why I bring it up is not only because of the damage done from this last blizzard, but I mean, there was already a lot of fuel in the woods to begin with. But we're also down the street from 5,000 acres of Wampatuck State Park, which isn't managed at all, as far as.
For forest fires?
Yeah, I mean, they'll respond to it, but they don't do any kind of management because of budgets.
Right.
And and ambers do travel, I'd like to see some kind of built-in fire breaks, if you will, like using Bates Lane. And I'm not talking about clear cutting, I'm just talking about, access so the fire department can get up there. There was talk about putting a water tower up there. Land has been purchased, and that might be a good idea, not only for water pressure and for this part of town, but also in the event of a forest fire. The other thing I want to talk about is the hunting. Just this past week, the state came out with a Lyme disease report, and they're thinking of increasing the hunting season for bow hunters and reducing the distance from 500 feet to 150
Okay.
around the houses.
Specifically for bow or for all hunting?
For bow.
So a hunter with a gun would still have a 500-foot buffer?
Can I jump in for just a second? Two pieces that have been touched on that I think are important. On the hunting piece, and again, these are all recommendations, and one of the other pieces we've discussed with the possibility of hunters maybe getting a permit from or registering with the Conservation Commission before they hunted on conservation property. And then that way they could be given a map and be made aware of where the homes were, where other pieces are. It might be a way to make people that don't hunt feel a little bit better that, yeah, the person that's out there knows where the trails are, knows where these things are. But we have to look for both sides to cooperate with that. We have some signage that's up, but folks that are out hiking during hunting season, walking their dog, have a responsibility to wear some bright colors, to wear hunter orange. If you're in other parts of the state or other parts of the country, it's just a given. During certain seasons, people wear those colors, or they put a bell on their dog, or they wear something. I mean, there's no hunter that I know of that would ever want to hurt a person or their pet. Certainly they don't want that to happen, but when you can have an incident like Norton last year where a state police officer shot someone, I mean, there's a person that ought to know what his target is, and that was wrong, and that could certainly bring concern to everyone. So we have a lot of things to think about like that, and the commission wants to do that responsibly. And with your help and with these folks' help, we can think about how that would come together. The other piece was forestry, and just to get it in everybody's mind, Vin understands a lot of this, he has a forestry management plan. Personally, I don't think there's a problem with harvesting some trees from these forests. Whether it's done for firewood, whether it's done for building materials, there's a number of reasons to want to do that. But it is something that we'd want to hear from folks. I mean, all of a sudden someone that's in the woods and has not seen anything change, and then there's a harvester or a skidder or something like that, like, holy mackerel, what happened here? But done, again, responsibly, it can be part of a practice in this forest that actually can make it healthy. And
in some ways, when you take a small harvest from a land and you're opening up the canopy, you're allowing sunlight into the understory, and that allows more space for saplings to come up, and it would be cool to put a deer exclosure, which is just basically a tall fence in a little square, and you can see then over time how the understory is inside that deer exclosure is just lush green, and outside the fence barren.
But there's an evolution that happens there, and I hate to say it, but since I was a kid out here in the woods where this was a lot of emerging forest, and we saw a lot of upland species, rabbits, quail, grouse, things like that, they've been replaced by turkeys, white-tailed deer, the coyotes, fisher cats, things like that, because of the change in the forest, not so much by other changes, but just by the different type of forest that we have today. So sometimes by doing an area that we clear, if we elect through some careful study, you know, obviously there's other endangered species here, these turtles and other things that are out here, the vernal pools, we don't want to disrupt any of those, but if we find a couple of areas that seem like they're correct to clear an area, then we could have what we call emerging growth, and that would be a lot of scrub and things which are great for another type of habitat.
And that habitat is becoming more and more rare in Massachusetts, so those species that depend on it are actually really struggling to get enough food.
Additionally, this forestry plan could result in a more resilient forest. I mean, we saw a whole lot of damage from this recent storm, that by having a variety of ages and species, they'll be able to withstand those kind of storms a lot better.
And fire.
And fire,
And fire.
yes.
What else is coming up for you guys?
I'm interested to know what type of funding mechanisms we might consider. For example, we do manage our beaches, and we have a beach sticker program, so that in order to be able to use the beach, you have to have a sticker to park in the parking lot. Similarly, I'm thinking that if we had some sort of a sticker program, that we could make a revolving fund, so that we would have some money.
Forgot to acknowledge Karen Conway from the advisory committee. Everybody's got to be watching the dollars.
Eventually, you'll know everyone in here. So I think the funding mechanism in general, and then who would manage the plan, I'm assuming it would be the Conservation Commission, but I think, you know, to Frank's point about, I know up in Hingham, for example, they only allow deer hunting with bow, no stalking, and you have to check in with the conservation agent. So, you know, I think we want to think about some of those issues as well.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, we hadn't thought of potential funding options, but I think that's quite interesting.
One of the things, Karen, after we talked about that, though, that a lot of towns is reciprocal access. You know, with the boys that camped, like up the North River, by permission and for no fee. And so we can go to other towns and use their parking and vice versa. So we have to think about that.
But we do allow people to buy out-of-town beach stickers, so you could allow out-of-town people to buy a conservation sticker as well.
No, there's a possibility or some piece, but you're right, it is going to cost money to do all this, and how do we pay for it?
Right.
We also want to consider the pros and cons of charging people. As yes, you would make more money You'd also possibly have fewer people visiting, fewer hunters taking out the deer than taking out the forest, so it's.
Well, but, you know,
But it's
I think one of the
both
issues
ways.
people have with which access, the limited, I'm confused, the more
That's the
access.
idea.
Yeah,
Charging people for a sticker for their car may discourage some people, but that may also help you manage not having too many people rushing on. You know what I'm saying? Because I do think that that's a way to manage.
One way
And
to
that's,
limit.
and frankly, that's one way, reason why we have the beach stickers, is because it is a way of managing how many people are actually using the beaches. And you're not charging them to use the beach, you're charging them to use the parking lot.
it's definitely an option that we can explore.
Who checks on the, I know that the beaches is some of the
The
specific,
police.
the police, so they would come down, they'd say and check it out.
Right around.
We can deputize you.
Always wanted to do
Town,
that.
For a
town has no
percentage.
problem with tickets.
Yeah,
There's a big mechanism.
More
for
ticket
that.
opportunities.
I just didn't know if they want to come down, Bates Lane.
Oh, no, they're gonna issue tickets.
Well,
to the-
I
Not this week, but.
But that's
Yeah.
an issue as well. In fact,
Um,
that would help if there were stickers and the police had to check, that might discourage people from doing things that they shouldn't be doing, just parking lots. So, I don't know.
Think Van has this?
There's state funding for trails and for forest management, so there's a funding source right there. One of them.
Yes.
You can't answer everything.
Well, I did have one other question.
Yeah, Gary.
You mentioned, maybe I misheard this, restricting bicycles? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
What, I'm lost, because a lot of people used to train with their bikes on these trails, and they more or less stop. Some of them have gone to Thayer Woods, wherever, but you don't see them as much anymore. I don't know all the reasons why. I would think that's something you'd want to promote, to connect up to like Wampatuck and other places where people bike, as opposed to restricting it. So I'm not understanding the reason why for that.
We definitely had a, Noah showed that connected bike route. I mean, we would love to have the spectrum of recreations out there, but biking can be really destructive to paths if they're not managed for it. So I think what we were trying to get at is restricting bikes to paths that can withstand that sort of active recreation.
specifically Baseline.
Noah biked from the train station in Cohasset over the hills.
Can do it.
What would the surface be on Bates where it would be accessible? Is that gravel? Actually, we can't be
We're
paved
gonna
with
look into
restrictions.
that. We're gonna look into different materials. That's part of what we're gonna be looking at this month. Different materials that would be good for universal access, not too bumpy for wheelchair wheels, and also sturdy for car traffic to the parking lot.
Not likely to be paved.
Not
I
likely.
don't think that's ever.
Well, in order to pay for the upkeep of that every year, I mean, do you have the funds to upkeep that every year and plow it?
We have some, and we can turn back to CPC, but you're right, it's a cost that we'll have to look at. We're thinking this would be gravel, and it would be kept graded, and,
Would you plow it, or would you close it for the
well, that
winter?
would, we'd have to talk to the DPW. My guess is it probably would not. I don't know. You know, something that would be up to the DPW to talk with them and see whether they had the funds to.
They're almost out of money this year.
Yeah.
Can it even be gravel? I mean, there are the rules about it being an antique private way, and I mean, I think there are conservation restrictions or something that limit what can be done to the Bates Lane.
We'll have to
But there
ask.
isn't gravel brought up there. mean,
I believe it could be.
Put in there.
It's a, well, those are questions that we'll have to.
We'll look
have
into
to
the
look at.
rules. Thank you for bringing that up.
The state also has the ADA Universal Access Department, so you can check with them.
Yeah, we'll have lots of, it's something that will be presented to the Conservation Commission in a final document. We'll have all the specifics of, you know, the specific grade and slope and all the fine grain details of those trails.
Personally, Bates Lane lends itself very well to an ADA type trail. You know, it's one of the clearer, flatter trails, and part of our goal is to make part of the wood, this property accessible. So, you know, we can look into that, and if it's allowed, it may be one of the things we consider. Because it is part of the commission's plan to try to make sure that most of our properties have at least some access. We've done it on the Driftway, and we'll continue to do that in other places. Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, if the town does put a water tower up there, it probably would be plowed, because they'll have to have some access to get to the water tower.
Thank you.
Let's get a water tower.
If that's all the questions,
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate this feedback that we're getting because we really want to give you the best opportunities and available for this site. So thank you.
Very good.